What are some signs someone has had a hard life? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1, two sides of the same coin. They can be compassionate and empathetic because they've walked in those shoes, or they are harsh and overly critical as a defense mechanism. Story 2, trust issues. Scared to get close to people, shock and push people away. Not fazed by situations that bother other people. Over-explain things. Come across as mean because they are trying to protect themselves from getting hurt again. Story 3. People who face tough times might show signs like being very cautious or guarded, struggling to trust easily, or having a strong sense of independence. They might also have a deep empathy for others' struggles. Story 4. Staying unnaturally calm in situations when everyone is jumpy, being somewhat indifferent most of the time, remain unresponsive to little harm. These can be associated with other character types as well, but those who have seen a lot of hardship usually act this way. Edit. All of a sudden, it turned from us sharing our ideas about people who have faced hardship to all of us connecting to all the other comments. Edit. Going through all the comments is kind of therapeutic because not only everyone's saying what they are, but also explaining why they are that way. We survived, guys. We always will. Story 5. They don't whine and ask for help when things are hard. They just deal. They don't assume people like them or take basic goodwill for granted. Being obviously vulnerable feels dangerous, and they'll conceal it rather than complaining. If you show them you're a real one, you move up in their personal hierarchy, and they see you in a different light after that. Story 6. I think there's two different types of responses. People can have both and display these in different situations, or sometimes people turn out more like one over the other when people have a hard life. This is the most typical one. But when people are overly cautious and find it hard to trust, they may be very stoic and hyper-independent. They may not open up at all. Sometimes they may be overly helpful. Be very wise and never quick to judge others. They treat people with grace and reserve criticisms as they understand that people can be experiencing hard times themselves and act as the person they wish they had toward others. Story 7. They don't realize that they've had it so hard because they are used to diminishing their feelings. This one is me. Also, traumatized people tend to struggle to identify real feelings in themselves. There seems to be a mind-body ghosting effect with emotions. Logically, they know what those feelings are, but find it hard to connect or label them. They tend to want to avoid the confrontations of life because they have been on edge or hyper-alert their whole lives. It's exhausting to always feel on, and sometimes they feel they have to fake it till they make it. They don't react to big things in the way normal people would. This is again a diminishment of feelings, but somehow the little things trigger them instead. This is also me. Traumatized people go on to develop disorders like anxiety and depression in adulthood, and tend to have physical ailments such as stomach issues, muscle pain, headaches, etc. They find it very hard to show their true selves to others for fear that, yes, all those negative things they think about themselves are indeed true. They tend to go it alone and not need or want help. They may even struggle to identify if they need it. They do not wish to be a burden to others and will go out of their way to be useful. This is me too. That's just some from my experience. I have childhood trauma, sexual assault at 5. I grew up and was raised in a household with a depressed mother who was physically there, but emotionally unavailable. I had weight issues and poor self-esteem, and I had a constant need to run away or isolate myself. I was parentified in my mid-late teens with my mother. My father had an affair and left us. My mother died soon after. And yada, yada, yada. I had never dealt with all my crap, and it hit me right in the face years later. I had a huge emotional episode and was diagnosed with GAD. I started counseling for everything, and I went on medication for about 2 years. The first thing I replied to my counselor when I told my story, and she said I had a hard life, was, I don't feel it was that bad and others had it way worse than me. But I learned so much about myself in those 2 years of counseling, and I learned some great tools for coping with life. Unfortunately, my GAD is lifelong, and stomach issues are also visiting me, suspected IBS, but I am in a really good place today. But because of everything, I will always feel a little abnormal and alien-like, and have to work harder at living my life. Those are sadly the breaks you get in life. But yeah, those behaviors I mentioned were just some of the things I noticed can happen. Story 8. I heard a woman once say she had a really difficult life, and now as a result, she's as mean as a cobra. I find that people who've had hard lives can be incredibly patient, empathetic, and understanding, but when someone crosses a particular boundary, they can become as mean as a cobra out of self-preservation. Story 9. Never looking people in the eyes, not saying hi to people when they enter a room or get to work, profusely sweating when it's not really warranted, has no deep relationships with anybody, flakes on hanging out all the time last minute, really wants close relationships but sabotages them because connection is scary. Story 10, I'll speak from experience here. They take antidepressants for their PTSD and other related mental illnesses. They avoid everyone, even if they are considered friends. They have some sort of escapism addiction, be it listening to music or playing video games, etc. They don't believe in anyone's compliments. No matter how heartfelt the compliment is, they won't believe it for a second. They can fake a smile so well that when you do see their genuine smile, you'll go and look at all the pictures you've taken with them and think, holy shit. They have a massive temper that is on a hair-thin trigger. They distrust anyone of a certain gender, and you will see their guard go up so quickly that it's not even funny. They almost, if not always, have their guard up. You've never seen them with their shoulders down. Their toes are always pointed towards the exit. They are almost always silent. They talk so softly that it is practically a mumble. When they sit, one of their legs is always shaking, and when you point it out, they either say, I can't help it, or they'll laugh it off. But when they try to stop, they end up just switching to something else, like peeling their fingernails even if they bleed, scratching at their wrist till it's red, or even pulling strands of hair out of biting their tongue, cheek, lip. And this is just the tip of the iceberg that I can think of. Story 11. They are not satisfied with their achievements because they always feel that someone will judge them. They don't get excited because they are always waiting for the bad to happen. They don't ask for help because someone learned them. That is weakness. They choose not to feel free, not even with the people closest to them, because they fear that they will be hurt. Overthinking even for smallest choice BC, they feel that their life depends on every single decision, and this is why they feel lonely and no one will help them. And so many other things that already mentioned. Every person react differently in the hard times. So be kind to everyone. BC, you don't know the story behind. Story 12. Well, my therapist had to remind me that most people don't take getting a terminal illness diagnosis in stride like it's just another Tuesday. But to me, it was just one of those things, just one more thing to deal with. I noticed that a lot with people who had really abusive upbringings. Minor and major events all feel the same. Being told I probably had a year to live at most felt the exact same as being told Subway was out of the bread I like. It sucked, but it wasn't world-ending. Shout out to my fucked up body. It's been 3 years and I'm still alive, motherfuckers. Story 13. I'll get downvoted for this because my observations aren't totally PC, but they are based on years of hard-earned experience. Lots of tats and piercings. People who modify their body a lot often have low self-esteem and feel dysphoria about their physical form, which is why they alter it to reclaim ownership. I find there's a strong correlation between lots of body mods and a familial history of abuse or sexual trauma. Another sign of abuse I've noticed is a lack of a solid, stable identity. People who take tons of vacant selfies. I don't mean curated glam selfies, but weird selfies with haunted eyes where they don't look good, and they have this lost quality on their face like they're trying to find out who they are through the photos. It's unnerving, and you know it when you see it. Women who seem hard, industrious, practical, and resourceful often had difficult upbringings. You see this a lot in hospitality for some reason. The manager at a restaurant, the bartender, our manager at a bar. They're very good at their jobs, but are guarded as people. There's probably a male counterpart, but it sticks out less since guys are encouraged to be hard. Story 14. In my life experience, the people I know who are unwaveringly positive and full of hope tend to have been dealt a bad hand in life more than their fair share of times. I believe these kind souls have developed this gift and way of being by living a long life full of uncertainty and becoming exponentially stronger every time another trial arrives at the door. Story 15. I've seen some shit. My mom is an addict. I followed in her footsteps for many years like my sister before me. I've told my story to few, and they are always blown away that I tell it so casually like it was something that happened on a Tuesday. I'm very guarded, super cautious of many people, and definitely able to handle 99% of situations with calmness. I was told a handful of times I'd be an excellent first responder. It's true, there is definitely a hierarchy to who gets to know me more than others. I've learned to trust my gut over the years, and I can read a room like nobody's business. This isn't to brag, it's called survival, and even though I am no longer an active addict myself, it still follows me everywhere. Started therapy this week, learning to live now. Story 16. Signs that someone may have had a difficult life can include a guarded demeanor, emotional distance, a lack of trust, low self-esteem, or visible physical signs of hardship. However, it's important to remember that these signs are not definitive, and people cope with challenges in various ways. Story 17: insensitivity to certain situations, which generally tend to shock others. I've had a pretty past, and I always notice how friends tend to do that inhaling gasp thing while covering their mouth with one hand whenever someone falls badly. People physically fight, or when a car hits another car in a traffic jam or such, while I tend to be more aloof and accepting with a, "Yep, this happens sometimes. Unfortunate. Time to move on." Often to the anger or chagrin of present company. You just get up, assess the problem and damage, salvage the situation, or cut your losses and accept things may be permanently different from now on, while thinking of how to make the most of it a bit later when you have some time. Scream once if you somehow feel emotionally irrational, but then it's time to move on. Story 18. So, yesterday, one of my colleagues seemed a bit down. I asked him what's bothering him, and he explained some situation with the management, and that it most likely will push him out of the door. I listened, took a deep breath, and said, "Okay, you know what happens when you close that door? Another will open?" He laughed a little bit and then shook his head, started to put his jacket and scarf on halfway through workday. Then just before walking out of my office, he said, "It just occurred to me that you must have been through a lot." I naturally asked him what made him say that, and he said, "Only people who've been through enough can still be optimistic, because the rest just give up, whereas the people who have struggled didn't have giving up as an option." He was smiling saying this. It was in an appreciative way. I smiled and turned my look to my computer screens. Once he left the room, my eyes became teary. I felt naked and vulnerable. I never want anyone to see my scars. I do my best to hide my past, but I also always see when people are hurting, and I feel them immediately as if it was my own. Unfortunately, I do get these reactions every once in a while. "Wow, how are you so insightful? What life experience taught you this?" etc. Didn't mean to give a long answer, but it reminded me of what my colleague said. I guess there is a summary out of this for what reckons someone with heavy past. Story 19. They struggle to see their problems as bad enough. Anything from injuries to problems to traumas. It's never bad enough to actually complain about. I tried writing a comment here 5 separate times, but none of them felt bad enough, and I questioned if I truly had a hard life. Really, I should be in therapy, lol. I can whine about non-issues, but telling my boss that I might need to take the phone at work since Grandpa's dying? No, that is not bad enough. I needed my mother to remind me that it is something that is quite sad and bad. Story 20. Eating cold food. For context, I didn't know it wasn't normal for a person to just eat foods as it is without heating it, especially here in Asia. Growing up, I kind of have to raise myself, so whatever foods that's put on the table is what I'll eat. It's been that way since I can even remember. Sometimes it's a leftover food from the day before, and I'll just eat it. I thought it was normal. Turns out I was just badly neglected as a child, lol. Now that I'm married to a Chinese family, lol, they were horrified of my eating habit cause I'll just eat whatever cold food, leftovers there is. To my surprise, they also don't eat any leftover foods. Story 21. This is so hard to explain, but one sign is this constant look on their face that they're crying when they aren't. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, Google Kristen Doute. She has this permanent look of sadness, almost as if she's crying when she speaks. If you watch Vanderpump Rules, you already know what I'm talking about. Or Lisa Jackson from America's Next Top Model. If you watch scenes of the reality show, it looks like she could break down at any moment. There's another contestant as well, Talia Brookins from America's Next Top Model, who has the exact same face when she speaks. Any waking second, it's as if she could break down and start crying. Watch all 3 of them in motion, and you'll see what I mean. Story 22. Some people I've known, myself included, hate the holidays, Christmas especially. I've been dreading it ever since we were officially closer to Christmas than New Year's. Nobody really gets what I mean when I say I love winter, but fear Christmas, and not in an Ebenezer Scrooge kind of way. Mariah Carey is like a Dementor, and that bloody intro Celesta signals the end times. Story 23. I haven't seen an overdeveloped sense of responsibility yet. My husband called me on this yesterday, trying to find solutions when there aren't problems, being anxious about making sure things are done, clean, taken care of, even when it's someone else's problem. Really, overly helpful. Story 24. Food hoarding. Refusal to throw away food that is rotten or just plain tastes bad due to a cooking mistake. Taking serious offense to the idea of wasting any amount of food, including crumbs. All signs that someone didn't have enough to eat. The ability to perfectly remember the exact words someone used in a conversation. but their memory is only perfect in that regard. They don't have a perfect memory in general. They have a perfect memory for specific conversations. This can come from someone frequently being lied to, gaslit, or otherwise manipulated. They start memorizing exact conversations in order to keep a grip on what's real and what isn't when the lying is constant. Story 25. They have a lot of compassion, and they also have a strong desire to be left alone. Oddly, they are the first ones to notice somebody else being alone and to go offer company. But that's the ones who've healed a bit. The other common trait is to be absolutely obsessed with the rules and making sure everyone is following them. I think they do that because the rules give some security. Story 26. Almost every single friend I have has had an extremely rough, traumatic life, and they all show it differently. A couple, it comes out through easily accessed anger and aggression, and others through hair-trigger fear and startle and response. Most, probably all, though generalized anxiety which manifests in varied ways. Alcoholism and addiction is rampant but not universal. Sometimes they're deeply empathetic, sometimes self-centered, sometimes coldly shutting off all emotions, and sometimes all three in the same person. Some talk freely about their trauma past, some downplay it, and some rarely mention it. Some are dangerous risk takers, and some extremely risk-averse. I guess every fucked up person is a unique trauma snowflake. Story 27. They can read or pick up on other people's emotions quickly. I can tell almost immediately when something is off either negatively or positively with someone I know after speaking to them for less than a minute. It comes from having to read people in order to gauge the situation and figure out how to respond accordingly. If you grow up with neglect, abuse, chaos, you learn quickly how to read a room and the people in it. I don't even have to know someone well. I can tell even with coworkers if something is wrong or has changed. It's a survival tool. If you can tell how someone feels, then you can avoid provoking them. Story 28. They have a hard time relating to annoyances they aren't directly affected by. Did someone say something passive-aggressive? They won't like it, but they won't seethe and bear active resentment about it. They might even find it tiring to keep up with. However, someone who makes their day-to-day life harder than it already is will bring out their ugly side. They have so much to be stressed about, they literally don't have the emotional bandwidth for outrage unless it's an active threat to them. Story 29, lots of feel-good comments here. But on the other side of things, a lot of people come out very damaged from a hard life. I mean, like legit trauma, sexual abuse, verbal and emotional abuse, neglect, violence, etc. A lot of people that experience something like that in their households grow up to be very angry and lash out easily. The cycle of abuse is legit and hard to break. Story 30, they don't take easy to compliments and probably never get any anyway. They don't trust easily. They also don't lose their cool at meaningless stuff. They realize life is just work. Either get with it or sink. Depending on how stressed out of a life one may have, one can usually see logic more clearly, less emotional and more logical. Story 31, I've seen empathy a lot in these comments, but another big one is apathy. And they can all come from a single person too. People are complex. For example, someone who seems really disconnected and keeps to themselves most of the time, but oversharing if they feel a connection with you and going on an entire novel's worth of rambling, like floodgates just pouring open. Story 32, you can see it in their skin, their hair, their teeth, and their eyes. Many people living hard lives simply don't have the knowledge or time or energy to take care of themselves. Meanwhile, they generally are experiencing more stress than most, and generally their appearance can make it tougher to get things going in a way they like it, so it's a self-feeding depression loop. Of course, there are people who look perfectly fine but have lived a hard life as well. Story 33, people with dark humor, aka making jokes about DEIs or wanting to be DDD, or probably laughing at a shared story that you may not notice is actually a trauma they experienced, can't take kindness and often reacts opposite of it, trust issues, cannot take any praise at all. Sometimes these kinds of people are kind, but when it's their turn to ask for help, they never do ask for help or never want any help because something might have happened to them that causes them to be like that. They just do things on their own. Or they could also be the people who always laugh in front of you, but when they turn around, their smiles just fade real quick. They could also be the people who are scared nearly to everything, even if they want to try. IDK, there are a lot of signs. Story 34, financially, someone who is excessively frugal or stingy, taking napkins and ketchup packets home, only ordering a side of fries and water when they go out to dinner with friends. Someone who makes unhealthy choices to prevent something costing them money, going to work while too sick, for example. Story 35. In a recent British documentary, I learned that a collection of dangerous symptoms are so rife among the poor working class of the country that they are called, collectively, shit life syndrome. Heart disease brought on by lack of exercise and habits of decades in length, combined with type 2 diabetes because of a long-standing bad diet due to a lack of money to buy better food for years in length, and bronchial problems caused by smoking. Some people have such a bad life with no prospect of bettering it, they are reduced to committing slow-motion suicide over the time span of decades. Luckily, of course, these people are patients of a socialized healthcare system for now. Story 36. One that I've witnessed is anger issues. I worked with a guy that has 4 kids, and his wife passed away, so he's been raising them alone. He's blown up on me and others a couple times over the things, because he has so much frustration built up inside from not getting any alone time. I can tell this is the case because I've also seen him be a really nice guy, but it just gets to him most of the time. Story 37. They do not trust easily. Think before they speak or act. Never waste money. When you become a trusted friend, they will help you out in little ways. Like with a new kettle, they say they have 2. Soup when you are sick. There will be deep, deep pain inside them you will never see or know about, like a lost child. They have a healthy respect for the law and won't amp up their own home life by standing up to a bad neighbor. Grateful. Story 38. Generosity. From what I have seen and experienced, people who grew up having a tough life due to money usually try and have a surplus of things and are a lot more likely to share it if others are lacking in that thing. Be it cooking and bringing it to others, sharing surplus clothes, etc., etc. Story 39. I've been abandoned enough times that I'm completely indifferent to people. My life is healthy now. I'm around good people who I love dearly, but wonder if something is incredibly wrong with me, because even when I love someone with my entire heart, if they left, I would simply feel nothing. I don't mourn my loved ones who died. I stopped mourning breakups. Any loss is followed by complete indifference and an all right, onto a new chapter mentality. Story 40. When they don't think it's wrong when someone talks behind their back or others isolating them. When every basic thing amuses and excites them. When they can't say no. When they've no one to talk to on holidays. When they pretend to be brave but are scared inside. When they apologize frequently. When they say they don't deserve this or that. When they're afraid of being happy. When they think you're going to leave them. Story 41. It's the little comments that they don't realize is unusual. I was talking with someone, and she casually mentioned her sister was in foster care for several years, in the same way you would say a sibling played a sport in high school. I think she saw the shock on my face and immediately started to cover up. Still don't know the background of this, but a lot of little things now make more sense. Story 42. When people offer to help me, even with basic tasks, I am still genuinely surprised and grateful. I didn't even consider help was a thing until recently, and I'm trying to get better about asking for it. I tell stories I think are funny, and only some people laugh and share their own stories. It's a common tell. When things go crazy, my car catching on fire, a homeless man trying to coerce me in a dark alleyway, my house falling apart, family drama, I'm pretty chill. I'm just logically trying to think of the next step and do it. Whatever. No biggie. I remain in total control of my facilities, but when I imagine bad things happening, my own death at any little thing, or an argument that'll snowball into a full-on brawl, etc., my anxiety is never worse. It doesn't make sense, but that's just how it goes. I didn't cry for about 14-ish years. I had to teach myself how, because physically I just couldn't do it at that point. It's like throwing up. You feel way better once you get it out, and I was dying for that release in certain situations. However, I have basically no tolerance for adults who throw tantrums or have total meltdowns, either when something doesn't go their way or they're in a somewhat dangerous situation. Stop bawling, shut the hell up, get your act together. I get that they can't help it, but they are just so far outside of my realm of comprehension that I want to smack them upside the head. Story 43. Substance abuse. Orwell had a great saying. At 50, every man has a face he deserves, or something like that. I have a friend, my former neighbor, who is like 40, 41 now and looks so much older. Really bad alcoholic. She's actually pretty intelligent once you get to talk to her. I mean, she's bright and literate, but her face, so much bad drinking. The more I learned about her family stuff growing up, the more it makes sense. Traumatic shit. Pretty much everyone in her family is a bad alcoholic. Her working career has been hard, too. Restaurant industry is awful to be in long term. It's why I hate how addicts are hated pretty much across the world. Substance abusers are usually covering up really dark shit they've experienced, whether it's one-off trauma or a lifetime of it. No one truly wants to shorten their lifespan and live in chaos. Be kind. Story 44. I had a pretty intense life and started meditating to understand myself and my surroundings when I was about 20. I'm 22, and people at work have told me a few times that they feel like they're talking to a 30-year-old. So I would say an indicator would be a faster mental emotional development. I'm sure we've all known people from school who were more mature for their age. Story 45. If their skull has had fractures and they have permanent damage to their brain and missing teeth, usually this is accompanied by extreme poverty under $3,000 a year. They won't have more than a couple pairs of clothes and generally will suffer from a large array of mental illnesses, and if they manage to stay alive, chemical dependency as well. Story 46. Having food issues and money problems. We never had enough food, and I never really was bought anything. So when I had kids, I made sure we had overly amount of food, and I made sure they got whatever they asked for until it hurt money-wise. Still in the head to this day about having enough food for my family. Story 47 can only speak for myself, but I have several coping mechanisms. Humor, don't let people in, even if they think they're close. I'm guarded and like to be alone, but most people think I'm pretty social. Hard time accepting help and feel the need to do things on my own and need to have control over situations. Always drive my own car when I go somewhere. Take the lead on projects, etc. Those are a few things I've noticed, and most are to protect myself in the future. I always try to be kind and will go out of my way to help someone if I can. I'll drop whatever I'm doing to help a friend in need. Story 48. They don't sweat the small things. Everyday things like losing a phone or having their stuff stolen does not make them upset. They tend to process everything a lot slower and are generally more reserved. If you do anger them, they will say nothing. If you are a snowflake and you start a war with them, they will break you down a long way down the line once you have forgotten about them. They are capable of taking abuse that regular folks cannot take. They tend not to react, but when they do, hide. Steel sharpens steel. Story 49. After my marriage the first few months, I used to break down and cry when my husband accompanied me to the supermarket, brought things for me, or went with me for walks. I was so floored when he took me out for my birthday and eventually our anniversary, and we actually had a good time. Prior to that, I was used to buying everything by myself, and there would be days I had to starve cause of dad's violence and all food be thrown down, plates broken, etc. I dreaded festivals and good days, especially cause never has one been without physical and mental abuse. I remember every birthday wishing this would be my last day on earth. I can survive violence after facing it for decades since childhood, but kindness and genuine love breaks me every single time. But if you ask me about my childhood, I'd probably tell you, it wasn't that bad. It's my mom and bro who actually suffered, etc. Which, though true, still I minimize the trauma I endured as well for so long. Story 50. If they struggle to talk, even about topics they enjoy, and when they are in a completely comfortable environment, stuttering, slurred speech, or stopping mid-sentence is not always because of an innate disorder problem. Often, I notice speech problems in people that have really, A, never been truly listened to in their lives, or B, endured so much trauma that it's afflicted the way they think in conversation. Story 51, I can't spend money on things for me. I love to buy things for other people, but feel guilty if I buy something for myself. My wife had to buy me shoes because I told her the ones I wore. I've only had for 2 years, and I got them for $10 on the Facebook Marketplace. She said it made her sad because I get so happy when I give her gifts, and I look so sad even when she gives me a gift because I don't want her spending money on me. It comes from being on my own since I was 13. I remember when I was in 9th grade, I had 7 shirts and 3 pairs of jeans and would not take money from working on a farm to buy clothes or anything. I bought food and sometimes had to give people gas money that would give me a ride to school. Story 52. Keen observation. Just looked up Kristen Dutta. Traumatized eyes. The right never matches the left. Modern example of Sanpanku PTSD eyes. One eye side of brain hemisphere seems to put up the front, needed, expected, while the other is a mismatch, and it's a subtle sign of disturbed, harmless or not, disturbed is disturbed. Look in the visage. It's like one eye is showing the public act, and the other can't help look shell-shocked. You won't see the numb or scared bird face altogether when posing in photos. You have to compare and contrast. When people are straight and authentic, their eyes tend to evenly hold the same expression, whether sad, hurt, happy, sad, or joyful. They light up, go up and down together, and even when they lose eye-shape symmetry with age, the pupils and irises tend to be twins and seem balanced in relation to each other. 50 shades of crazy eye, and people can be disturbed only temp in their lives or triggered later. Once you see it in others or yourself in photos, grinning for a camera during a deeply dark time behind the scenes, you start to pick up on it, like a detective. Story 53, inability to care for themselves the way they care for others. This is not always the case, but many people I know who've been through a lot are the kindest, most generous, and understanding people ever towards those around them. They are big givers. However, when others are extremely kind towards them, they often have trouble accepting the kindness or help. Story 54, I'm not sure if you meant mental or physical, but it made me think of a story I heard years ago when Oprah Winfrey didn't finish her piece of wheat toast and she put half of it back in the fridge to eat later. She was a billionaire by then, I'm sure, and saved half a piece of toast, but she didn't grow up rich, and that stuff sticks with you. I save all my leftovers. I don't waste any of it. I don't know if that's so much that sign that someone had a hard life, but I have definitely gone without eating before I've eaten Tums for dinner. Story 55, ITT, lots of posters flattering descriptions of their own self-concepts, so they can feel doubly pleased with themselves for both the qualities they attribute to themselves and for the fact they've taken those qualities as proof they've been victimized more than people who behave differently to them, whose different behaviors are of course taken to indicate that they can't ever have really suffered. Story 56, overt displays on social media and in person of compassion and empathy for causes and people with whom they have no personal connection, jumping on many causes du jour in the memescape, while alienating everyone around them with relentless, self-righteous indignation. You dare not differ from their opinions and assertions in any way or offer factual corrections, lest ye be blocked and accused of gaslighting. I've seen several family members and friends go through this very public phase online. I knew some of their background struggles. In some cases, they settled down after a few years of that phase and seemed to find some genuine peace and compassion. Some never do, or maybe it just takes longer. Story 57, you finish your plate. We were lucky. There was always some food on the table, but when times got tight, nothing was lost. That's what we've got. Don't let it go to waste. And chew a lot, which really works. Mom was a war baby. Grew up in WA with rationing until the age of 15 and didn't see a banana until 2 years later. Even now, she can't bear to leave an empty plate, which is a problem when she comes to America and deals with portion size. Story 58, I used to work with pediatric patients, and I witnessed a family having problems again with taking care of their kids. The kids had to go into foster care. Again, they just acted like they were going to visit for a fun time. It was standard operating procedure for them. Being rooted out of their homes in the middle of the night didn't faze them. They also seemed starved for affection. They would be overly familiar with practical strangers. No amount of neglect registered with them. I thought back to my childhood and imagined how traumatizing that would have been to me as a child. I would have cried for days and been rather shy of strangers. Story 59, it is that one person sitting in the corner wishing that you or anyone will not even notice him, her being there. Just don't want to talk to anyone. Don't want to be friends. Don't want to attend the party or team building. Don't trust anyone. A sign that the person has had a hard life and got fuffed by almost everyone who he ever had to deal with, very possibly even own family. Now choosing to avoid any contact because of presumptions, it will end with another pain and suffering. People making fun of them because of that. Some see it as a weakness and expect no defense back from them, so if they need to boost their ego, they tend to choose them as a target for that. Only support the frustration and promotes disinterest inside those people, so they close up even more. Story 60, generally speaking, this certainly doesn't apply to everyone, but most people who do, especially beyond alcohol and weed, are filling a void, whether they realize it or not. The more users I meet, the more I notice that they usually have seriously broken families or other trauma. If you're struggling, please don't hesitate to seek therapy. It's okay to ask for help. Story 61, my granddad was double orphaned by age 2. Dad killed for a debt, mother yeeted herself on Christmas in the car with him in her lap, then raised by his grandma who fell over from a stroke in the middle of the street when he was 14. The first 30 years of his life easily could have ruined that man. He ended up a senior VP of regions and retired 25 years ago. I can't say this holds for everyone, but that man is one of the most generous and liberal people I know. He's firm and hard on us for the better, but he'll always pick up the phone and is always there for us when we need it. I think he'd do crimes before letting that happen to anyone in his circle, and he donates extensively to St. Jude's every Christmas. IDK, that answers the question, but he's definitely the most dinner story person I know, and that's how it impacted him. Story 62, I've spent some time in the school of hard knocks. Some takeaways. Empathetic to others, less empathetic to myself. I keep people at arm's length. I'm independent in a fault, have to pry some stuff out of me, and I don't even realize because that's the way it's been. I've got red rascals, definitely. I love genuinely. It's not something I spread around because don't really like people in general. I do see good in everything, along with the shite. I find the world endlessly amusing, really funny, even in the dark times. I am resilient and can MacGyver anything. The people I know that share these things are all pretty smart, in all the best ways, see the world in a very different way, and they are way more trustworthy MO. Story 63. People who have had hard lives think that in every single interaction with them, you are really trying to get or money from them, and they will dress like whores to manipulate the people they encounter because, well, they just want from me. I'll use that to my advantage. They frown as a default. They swear in inappropriate ways that just make no sense. They do. People who have had not hard lives express gratitude for everything you do for them, behave kindly and use profanity judiciously, and seldom. They laugh and make jokes. They hum or sing and enjoy music. They wake up rested, looking forward to another day. Story 64. I was traumatized at 7 years old when the babysitter's granddaughter ran up to her dad and said I had put sticks inside her WTF. I was 7. The father picked me up by the shirt and screamed in my face, "Did you touch my little girl?" The girl was taken to a doctor immediately, and nothing of the sort happened. In the time it took for the family to go to the doctor and come back, 3-4 hours, I was treated like a scumbag, told to go into a room and not come out. Dead silence in the house. When asked why the little girl said what she said, she replied, my 8-year-old sister told her to do it. 2 years later, when I was 9, my sister came out and told the world my dad had been molesting her. FFS, my mom dragged me out of school in such a manner it prompted the school to ring the police. My mom was going berserk, and she is a big woman. 2 policemen were on the scene, and they told her she could not drive in the condition she was in. That enraged her even more, and she kneed one of the officers in the groin. Bang, I arrested her and threw her in the back of a police wagon like a sack of potatoes. I got out of the car and ran at the police, but my principal grabbed me, guided me back into the school. Around 8 p.m. that night, my mom came into my room and told me about my father. I still didn't understand why. I was 9. I screamed at my mom why he would touch such an ugly girl. 10 years old, no birthday, nothing but abuse. I looked like my father, she and my sister would say. My mom then left us with a man while she went into a club in Nambucca, heads to watch her friend play in a band. He molested my sister and made me and her do shit to him. 11 years old, I ran away from home with whiplash abrasions all over my legs. From a radio lead, went from Bexley to Bondi Junction on my own. No money, just the PJs from the night before, with the big old pee hole at the front for, peeing. I was tricked by a lady who meant well but didn't know. She fed me, gave some clothes and $5 and asked if I could help her in the yard. She called the police, and the police took me straight back to my mother. My mom then took me to a police station and tried to charge me with uncontrollable behavior, because this is what my Nana did to her at my age. When told by the police we don't do that anymore, she dumped me at the station and said she didn't want anything to do with me. 2 hours later, she came back. In that time, I had shown a police officer my legs. She was demanding that release me, and they said no. The Australian courts would send me back to her twice. The third time they went to send me back to my mother, I watched in horror as the judge smacked the gavel and ordered me to return to my mother's custody. I stood up and screamed I would run away or kill myself, and the judge right there reversed his decision. He seen what I seen when I looked at my mother, and I screamed out. My mother had an evil look of malice on her face. This is just some of the shit to happen to me. I've never really talked to professionals about it, just my friends, and it drove my best mate away when I told him I couldn't go visit his little girl, and why. The mental stuff didn't bother me until the pandemic. I was alone in a tiny room in a pub. My mom had just robbed me for small money, $500. As I tried to leave her home in the back of a police wagon, had no cash, and I was stuck 30 kilometers from town by a freeway. My spelling and grammar may not be the best, and for that, forgive me. I was working on the showgrounds at 15. If you got this far, I'm sorry if I've made you sad. Sad and loneliness in a world full of people who don't understand. Story 65. If you had a hard life as a kid, totally unprepared for adulthood, because you never thought you would live that long. Likely, lots of family members died young from violence and treatable illnesses. I have no idea what is normal, so avoid social situations. I literally spent much of my childhood hiding from my father between two cabinets in a basement. Didn't know how to properly use silverware. Grooming, a total challenge. Had never traveled. Had to fight to go to college as the girl. I faked it for a while, but as I started to address my depression, I'm back in all of it. Story 66, I'm 31-year-old male and have seen fair bit from personal experience. I would never ask for help. Come what may, I stay silent if my words is not valued. Making friends is difficult because all my life, each one has ditched me when they have used me to their needs. Parents and my little sis who is married is all I care for and would do anything to safeguard them and keep them happy and satisfy their needs emotionally and monetarily if needed. Story 67, lack of trust. People tend to get offended when someone doesn't trust them, but usually it's because that person's trust has been abused so much that they can't give it to anyone, not even close people. I always fear someone is going to steal my phone, throw it, break it, look into stuff they shouldn't when I hand it out to my most trusted friends. Younger, I didn't believe classmates when they told me our teacher died because I didn't trust anyone at the time. Story 68, as a fellow trauma bearer who's living life on easy mode these days, I can list a few things I've noticed I do often and have noticed in others too. Making jokes about the darkest shit that had me screaming on floor. Always expecting shit to go down so I'm restless even in comfortable settings. Thinking people want to be with me because they pity me so I never feel truly appreciated for being me. Being calm and composed when others panic because I've seen worse. Opening up too much or too little, depending on how lonely I feel. Lately, life has been very good to me, and the only stress I have is academic and career-related. I can't believe this is the type of peace people enjoyed while I was shivering in fear. One more thing I've seen is I'm always grateful. For the smallest gestures and acts of kindness that people do for me, I notice and I'm grateful. And I kind of have ADHD. It's a little too much sometimes, so that has me doing weird shit too. I can never make out if my actions are so weird because I have ADHD or because of the golden trauma badge on my shoulders. Anyways, I'm so happy at life right now. If my grades get better and I start earning more, it'll be at the happiest I could ever be. I'm so glad I didn't die back then. Story 69. Hi guys, I'm looking for some help. For the context, I'm 22-year-old boy. I've been losing my hair since 18-year-old. Thinning from top crown area and my hairline has been receded to a point where it feels like I'm an old uncle. My old friends, when they see me after a long time, they get extremely surprised and shocked to see my hair condition. They try to humiliate me. How should I deal with this? It is affecting me to a point where I'm not able to have even normal talk, conversation with anyone like before. It has affected my self-confidence and self-esteem. Every time I try to converse, someone mocks me and try to make fun of me. How to reply this kind of people and what should I do?